For 10 years, he did not touch a single piece of food or drop of water. He spent his days training extremely hard in harsh places because he was on a mission to become a god. 2,500 years ago, there was a great war between two kingdoms on the Ganges River. The palace of Kapila was attacked by Kosala, dragging its people into war and suffering. The people could only hope that one day, a chosen one would be born to save them from this plight. One day, the son of the king of Kapila was born. Everyone felt an intense wave and realized he was blessed by the gods. The villagers were amazed, and all kinds of animals gathered to witness this special event. Although Maya was happy for the blessings upon her son, she suddenly felt weak and fainted. The king and his soldiers hurried back to the city upon hearing that the queen was in danger. Maya said that Shid would be an extraordinary person with great faith. She looked at her child one last time before passing away. A priest named Aksita visited the king. He felt honored by the priest's visit. When he entered the room, the priest was astonished upon seeing the baby. The king asked why the priest was so startled. It turned out that the baby was pointing one finger to the sky and another to the ground. This indicated that Shid was a revered person, meaning this child would become the king of the world. 10 years later, Shid was sitting in the palace watching dancers perform, but he was not interested. He felt tired and decided to go out to the balcony, where he suddenly stared at something. Shid sat with other children, and an old man told them to grow up and become great warriors. Shid stood up and asked the old man if war truly leads to death. The old man said some survive, but Shid wanted to know what happens to a person after they die. Shid's seemingly foolish questions annoyed the old man. While sitting, two boys led Shid into the forest. They decided to hunt a rabbit with a bow. They chased it and finally cornered it. Redka was about to shoot again when Shid jumped in to stop him. This annoyed his two friends, who went off to hunt another animal. Redka fell into a swamp and couldn't escape. He sank deeper and deeper. Shid heard him and ran to help, but being just a child, he couldn't save him. News reached the villagers, and they rushed into the forest. Shid stepped out of the group, wanting to hide his crying face but couldn't. He ran into his stepmother's arms and sobbed. His stepmother took him to his room to rest. A servant informed them that the king was coming, but Shid, too ashamed of himself, stayed in bed. She told him that everything would be fine and that he should sleep for a while. Then she let him rest and went to meet the king. After some time, the king said that Shid was old enough to learn martial arts. Shid, who had not yet slept, overheard their entire conversation. Shid then learned archery and swordsmanship. 5 years later, Shid was sparring with his opponent and soldiers. Everyone watched in amazement, commenting on how much he had improved. Shid could counter and attack his opponent without failing. His father was proud to see his son become stronger. A soldier rushed in with an urgent letter. The war against Kosala was about to begin. The king told Shid to defeat Kosala, succeed him, and become the king of the country. However, Shid still questioned his father about why wars occur and why people have to kill each other. This angered the king, who found Shid indifferent to the war. When the war began, Kosala and Sakya clashed, disregarding the poor village caught between the battlefield. Shid watched from above as the two nations trampled the village, with Sakya raining arrows on Kosala's front lines, annihilating them. Shid saw the heap of dead bodies and couldn't stand it any longer. He and his men entered the battlefield. Both sides fought with all their might. Shid rode into the battlefield, telling them to stop, but his voice was too small to be heard. Shid was surrounded by Kosala soldiers. They identified him as the enemy prince and tried to kill him. The Kosala leader attempted to attack Shid, but suddenly time seemed to slow down. As he got closer to Shid, his body began to glow brighter. Eventually, he fell to the ground, coughing up blood. The leader felt as if Shid was looking deep into his soul and judging him. Kosala soldiers were immediately ordered to retreat. That night, Shid's wife approached him and asked why he didn't rest. He replied that humans are fragile and easily die. He wondered why they couldn't do anything about it. As Shid stood up, memories of traveling across the country and witnessing suffering flooded back. a slave boy was trampled by a fruit vendor for stealing. The child writhed in hunger while the vendor continued to trample him. Shid sank deeper into his thoughts, feeling surrounded by darkness, struggling with the realization that life brought pain. To escape that pain, he broke free from his thoughts and found himself sitting under a tree in the forest. Shid made a crucial decision to leave everything behind to seek the truth. Late at night, he entered his father's room while he slept. Shid quietly left a note asking for forgiveness. He rode his horse to the hilltop, took one last look at the city, and began his journey. A servant caught up to Shid and begged him to return, but Shid dismounted and told him to take the horse back to the city. He then started to remove all his belongings. The servant was surprised when Shid used a knife to cut all his hair. Shid handed his hair to the servant, telling him to give it to the princess, and then left. His biological mother, Maya, had always watched over her son, believing in the prophecy that he would become a great person and erase the suffering of all beings. Shid's journey was arduous. He relied on the kindness of strangers for food and slept wherever he could. One day, he arrived in a village suffering from severe famine. People lay nearly lifeless on the ground. Shid used his cloak to cover a trembling mother and child. Shid walked toward the stream when a man approached him, inviting him to his home to wash up. Shid was given a cloak to wear. Another monk in the house asked for a cup of water, and the man happily went to get it, pleased to have 2 monks in his home. Their conversation was interrupted when the man returned with the water. He explained that his son also wanted to become a monk. As they traveled together, Shid asked Defa about the scar on his left eye. Defa said that while meditating on a rock, some people provoked him. Defa grabbed a torch and stunned everyone by burning his left eye with it. He explained to Shid that they claimed asceticism was meaningless, so he burned his eye to prove them wrong. He believed that surpassing the limits of asceticism would lead to a great rebirth. After crossing the swamp, the 3 of them waded into the water. Asa followed closely but injured his leg on a submerged tree. From then on, Shid carried Asa on his back. Throughout the rest of their journey, they traversed various landscapes, from deserts to mountain peaks. They arrived at a village, meditated, and received food from the villagers. While traveling at night, they encountered a group of horsemen, and the leader recognized Defa from a past encounter. Tada, who had helped them, took great care of Asa. Asa fainted from the pain. In his coma, Asa wondered if he had died when he heard a voice. It was Shid's mother, now a deity. She told him he couldn't die because he had to stay with Shid. Shid was performing CPR on Asa and saw he was still alive. However, Asa remained in critical condition, as his fever wouldn't break until his leg was fully healed. When Shid spoke, Mira recognized his voice. They have known each other since before Shid was a prince. They had fun together, but it was discovered by the king. He ordered to kill Mira, but Shid stopped her. He proposed that if Shid married Princess Ayasa, he would let Mira go. Shid reluctantly agreed to this decision. However, when Shid arrived at the yard, he discovered that a guard had burned Mira's eyes with a sword as punishment for her. Shid was still surprised after all these years when he met Mira again. He apologized. She felt regret for not becoming the great king she always wanted. The next morning, Asa suddenly ran down to the village, shouting to the villagers that a tornado was coming and telling them to evacuate. But unfortunately, no one responded to his call. Suddenly the wind began to rise, rolling into a tornado. Unfortunately, it was all too late and the tornado was already approaching. During the chaos, Asa rescued a child who was nearly swept away by the wind. After a while, the winds passed and peace returned. After that incident, the 3 of them went to the forest to practice. Going through separate trials, Asa goes to a swamp where a man appears. Defa said that the ascetic forest was the most suitable place for practice. Ignoring the different weather conditions and developments around him, Asa did not participate in the hard training, but instead stood and watched them. By this point, Shid and Defa were both quite skinny. Meanwhile, Asiris continued to mark the tree. Shid began to wonder if torturing himself was stupid. Shid faces harsh times. But luckily Tada came to his aid. Shid wonders why Tada came to rescue him, and Tada says he won't let Shid die. Defa said that dying while undergoing rigorous practice would bring glory. Suddenly Tada saw smoke and ran towards the tent, where Mira was. Tada rushed over and saw several monks burning the hut. He pushed them away and rushed into the burning tent. He quickly grabbed her and carried her outside just before the tent completely collapsed. Tada took Mira to stay in a cave. Shid asks about Mira's condition, and Tada says she is very tired. Shid entered the cave and met Mira, but she told him not to come close. In the next training session, they will hang themselves in the middle of a cliff. Defa asserts that it is wrong for a person in the ascetic forest not to practice asceticism. Tada is currently taking care of Mira. It seems Mira is hopeless now. He put the food aside, hugged her, and promised to save her. Asa talks to Shid and he decides to save her. Shid began to suck the poison out of Mira's body. Tada wanted to do this for him because he was worried that Shid would get Mira's disease. Mira felt ashamed, cried, and called herself dirty. The next day, Defa and several monks came to the cave and accused him of neglecting his practice. Mira added that she cursed herself, felt angry for loving Shid, and had her heart broken for being blind. Now they have met again. She felt like she was alive again, and she thanked Shid for not only saving her body but also her heart. Then Mira and Tada left. That night, Asa was marking the tree and told Shid that on the next full moon night he would die from hungry animals. Shid promises Asa that no matter what happens, he will always be his best friend and will protect him. On the night of the full moon, Shid stopped meditating and determined not to let Asa die. After his sleep, Asa disappeared. Meanwhile, Asa volunteers to follow the rabbit into the forest. He passed by a bush and accidentally fell into a hole full of wolves. Asa saw the wolf cubs whining from hunger. Shid arrived at the hole in shock and tears when he saw the wolves tearing Asa apart. He ran until he tripped and fell face down on the grassy ground, wailing for Asa. As the days passed, Shid had to practice asceticism, which was extremely painful. He even tied himself to a tree trunk, let hungry crows dissect his body. Other monks came to chase the birds away and begged him to stop, and they understood his asceticism. He passed by Defa, who finally admitted that Shid had achieved the highest state of asceticism. Afterwards, he sat on a bed of thorns meditating on a cold cliff. He reminded himself that he would become a rock and that in a rainstorm he would turn into water like strong winds. They blew him off the top of the cliff and he plunged into the water below, still alive. When he closed his eyes, he heard his mother's voice calling him and telling him not to die. She then appeared before him, saying that Asa was born to be eaten by wolves, to convey to him that all life is interconnected. He began to cry over the tragedy of Asa's fate. Before disappearing, she advised him to survive. As soon as she disappeared, Shid woke up to find himself face to face with a woman, and she was glad that he was okay. He told her that her porridge saved his life. As he walked, some animals walked towards him. He was leaving when he met Defa standing under a tree. Defa asked him if he was running away, but Shid replied that he would not go into the ascetic forest again. Shid walked a little further from the forest and met a group of horsemen surrounding him. Prince Haka calls him Prince Shid, but he tells him that he is no longer a prince. The prince dismounted and pointed his sword at Shid. Haka told Shid that his family had made him miserable and that he was sure he would die. He told Shid to draw his sword and face him. He told Haka that he didn't hate him but rather pitied him. Prince Haka was confused and asked Shid what he was talking about. Shid asks Haka if he likes revenge? And does it bring him even a little joy, or does it just make him miserable at night? This made him angry and he prepared to swing his sword to attack Shid. But suddenly a bolt of lightning hit the sword, causing it to fall from Haka's hand. Haka orders his men to kill Shid. They surrounded him, but immediately retreated due to being stopped by an unnamed force. Shid handed the sword back to the young general. He immediately withdrew and told his men to withdraw as well. Shid was meditating in front of a swamp when someone walked out. He slowly approached and knelt down, saying he wanted to die because he was the unhappiest person in the world. He replied that his parents were trampled to death by elephants, and his second mother also died of an epidemic. Meanwhile, Prince Haka arrives at a tomb, where a herd of hyenas is gathered around. Haka used his sword to chase them away. Then he started digging the ground, which was actually where his mother was buried. He asked his mother's body to forgive him. Shid told the swamp man that the prince was also an unfortunate person and that each person carried his own burden. Shid's words had a profound impact on him. Shid placed his hand on the giant's shoulder. Shid's body began to glow and slowly spread to the surrounding area. The light spread throughout the forest and spread further. Shid told the swamp man that he made a contribution in life just by existing, just as his parents were happy when he was born. This caused the swamp man to awaken. He told the man that Prince Haka must also have found comfort in his kindness towards his mother. The swamp man told Shid that when he completed his practice and became a great man, he would come to Shid. He thanks Shid for teaching him the meaning of life and returns to the water. As the sun rose over the horizon, he heard a voice telling him that he had attained enlightenment and that he had now become a Buddha. He realized that he had made everyone he had ever met happy. The war ended when Prince Haka stopped and the people could return to the city to live normal lives. Tada and Mira find happiness, Defa and the monks are still on their own paths. Shid continues his journey.